Hello and welcome to happilyeducated.com. As you can hear, I kind of lost my voice this week, so sorry I sound so croaky. But anyway, way back in April of last year, I wrote a blog post about human agency. And in case you missed it, the term agency basically refers to our human ability to make choices that influence the course of our own lives. Personally, I love the concept of agency because when I learned about it, it made me feel empowered to make some changes in my life that I think have worked out pretty well overall. Basically it gave me or gives me a sense of having some control over my own destiny, which I find to be very, very reassuring. However, since that time, I've read quite a bit more about agency, and as it turns out, it's not nearly as powerful as I would like to think it is. Basically, an individual's agency is constrained by a number of factors, most notably perhaps chance and social structures. And there are a lot of scholars out there that argue that agency and related concepts like free will just plain don't exist at all, that they are merely cognitive illusions. And the reasoning behind this is essentially that our biological predispositions and our sort of social groups and the influence of our social groups is just that much more powerful, that we really don't have a whole lot to do with how our lives progress in comparison to those influences. And although these arguments are very, very compelling, I still believe that agency exists, in part because I want to believe it. It would just be too depressing to feel like I had no control over my own actions. And I actually truly believe that I have acted as an agent of change in my own life as well. But of course, the agency doubters would argue that this is because the illusion of agency is so very, very compelling. Now, certainly, where and when you are born determines a whole lot about how your life will progress. From the language you speak, to the food you eat, to the education you receive, these are all matters of just, the lottery of birth, as they say. And even more importantly, your genetic makeup and your family relationships are almost entirely dependent upon chance. So, if you happen to be healthy and intelligent and attractive and born to a family that wants you and can support you and lives in a safe place, then lucky you, that's great. But if not, you probably have some extra challenges in store in life. Now, on a completely separate note, I recently watched a movie called The Lottery of Birth that I would highly recommend. If you are a person who watches or reads blogs like this one, you would almost certainly get something out of it. It's not exactly enjoyable in like the ha-ha sense, but it is very thought-provoking, and actually I found quite inspiring, so you might check that out. But back to what I was saying. Your ability to deliberately shape your own life is constrained by a number of factors. Part of the issue is that a lot of our daily decisions aren't really decisions at all, but matters of habit or social conditioning, basically. So it's not clear to what extent our actions and behaviors are our own choices and to what extent they are merely imitations or the product of who we know and where we live and that kind of thing. So regardless of whether agency truly exists or not, there is no doubt about it that humans have the ability to believe that they can influence their own lives, that we have a sense of agency, as it were, or we can have a sense of agency. And according to a variety of scholars, this belief in your own ability to shape your life is actually good for your mental health. Bandura furthermore argues that people who believe they can influence their own lives are actually more able to influence their own lives than those who don't believe they can. So even if agency is an illusion, it's an illusion that is good for people and makes them happy. And so for that reason, I, for one, am happy to be deluded at this point anyhow. Now, you may be wondering what all this has to do with my dissertation. Well, in a nutshell, actually I'm going to go tend to that baby for a second, and I will get back to this post in a bit. Okay, sorry about that. As I was saying, musical development is shaped by both chance and social structures. And, people are born with certain physical and mental characteristics that either constrain or enable their musical abilities. And they're also born into specific social groups that have certain beliefs or values associated with them in terms of music, and also encourage or discourage specific musical behaviors typically. So, if you are born in India, you will probably learn about Indian music. If you're born in China, you'll probably learn about Chinese music, etc., etc., etc. Furthermore, chance and social structure continue to influence a musician's development throughout the course of his or her life. The musical development of one of the participants in my study, for example, was significantly influenced by the deaths of 3 of his teachers on separate occasions. And this was, of course, these were events that he had no control over whatsoever. But that, of course, once it happened, he had no choice but to find new teachers, which brought his development in a different direction. Now, the developmental trajectories of participants in my study were significantly influenced by whatever musical opportunities or, musical opportunities their social environments offered or provided. So, for example, the jazz, classical music, and musical theater participants had plenty of opportunities to learn about music in school. Whereas the rock and hip hop musicians, their genres just weren't supported in their school environment. So they had to look elsewhere for musical opportunities and learning experiences. Now, according to my research, agency also contributes to shaping musical development. And as I mentioned in my last post, the resources that are available in your social networks are very significant in terms of what type of musician you become. But it's not just about having resources. It's about what you actually do with them, how you use them. For example, one of my participants, he grew up in a very, very musical family, and his mother signed him up for guitar lessons at a young age. But he was, at the time, completely uninterested in learning about music, and he never, ever, ever practiced. So, of course, his musical growth was quite unremarkable. But then when he reached 8th grade, for whatever reason, he just decided that he wanted to become a rock musician. And he started practicing like crazy. And all of these resources that he had available, he used them. And in addition, he went and found his own resources, more resources. He sought them out on his own. And his musical progress at that time just picked up and sort of, skyrocketed. So in a very, very short amount of time, he became a very accomplished musician just because he was both using the resources he had and seeking out additional resources where needed. Now, I could go on and on about this, but this post is already long enough as it is. So in my next post, I will describe my theory of how developmental trajectories in music are constructed. But you might need to wait a couple weeks for that post because I'm defending my dissertation next Tuesday, woohoo. And then after that, I'll probably have to do some editing on it, unfortunately. So it may be a week or two or more before I get back to this again. But thank you for your patience, of course, and until next time, happy learning.